Welcome to the GenX Experience, the podcast that celebrates the unique journey of 80s kids navigating midlife. I'm your host, Blythe Alperin. Each episode, my guests and I will share with you the unique differences that define our generation and how we are navigating those differences in the real world. Join me for laughs, insights, and a sense of community. Let's embrace the GenX Experience together. Welcome back to the GenX Experience, episode 33. Can I tell you, I can't wait till I get to say episode 50. I know it's coming. Anyway, and happy summer for those of you that enjoy it. I personally am over it already. It's too freaking hot. I am melting. I love my doggy, but his need to go for walks is annoying. And I love going for walks and I love being outside, but it is too freaking hot. When is fall coming? Anyway, we are in a new month, so that means we have a new subject that we're talking about. First, I want to just say thank you again to everyone who's been listening to the podcast, and it's still growing. It makes me so happy. I appreciate the responses to last month of, interview with my brother and sister and the conversation with Craig about being an only child. And to my family and friends who listen, especially. I'm sorry if I made some of you sad. I know it is hard to talk about, us growing up and, our parents not being here. If anyone knows our parents, it's, I'm sure it takes them back and it's hard. It's hard for us too. I miss my mom and dad all the time. In fact, July this month will mark 8 years without my mom. And sometimes it feels like yesterday. It definitely still feels like yesterday. Anyway, getting a little deep, but that kind of leads me into our new topic for the month. We're going to talk about mental health. I'm going to share my story and my challenges. It's going to get a little personal. I debated whether to share this, but if it can help anyone, fine. And it is a fact of my life and not something I'm thrilled that it's a fact of my life, not something I'm always proud of, but I don't want anybody else to go through it. We're also going to first talk about why I think Gen X struggles with mental health. And it's because of the way that we were raised. We didn't talk about mental health. You'd hear the conversation everyone has that one crazy in the family. That usually was someone that probably was suffering from mental health, but we didn't talk about that. When we had conversations about suicide growing up, it was that you're selfish. It was the signs to look out for. Never was it really if you're feeling this way, this is what you should do. There were hotlines and things. We had after school specials. There was, and I distinctly remember it was called A Desperate Exit, about a teenager's stunned when his best friend commits suicide and is left with the answer, the question of why. I remember seeing another show, I think Molly Ringwald was in it, where her and her boyfriend committed suicide, in a car, the door down, because their families wouldn't let them be together. There were definitely conversations about it, but it never was oh my God, what was that person going through? It was what a selfish piece of crap. How dare they? Thank God that conversation has changed, because no, you're not selfish. People who attempt suicide or unfortunately succeed, it's not because they're selfish. It's because they are in so much pain that they cannot see a way out, and they don't want to burden their friends and family with what's going on with them. And they think it'd be better off if they just weren't here anymore. Now, we all know that's not true. And that if they ask for help, their friends and family, I would hope, would give it to them. There are resources. There are numbers you can call. You could go to the hospital. You could, talk to people. And I hope everyone has someone in their life that they feel comfortable sharing it. And if you ever have a friend come to you that's talking about that, and if you don't feel equipped, just listen to them and then be okay, we're going to figure this out. And then, go to resources to get them help, because we don't need to lose any more people. And in fact, suicide was a kind of a big problem in the 80s. I was doing a little research because I do remember how much it seemed to be talked about, how I don't feel like anyone, if you ask any Gen Xer, if they know, didn't know someone that committed suicide. Yeah, I remember at least I feel like a couple people in my school. And the thing was, it was very prominent among males. And the overall suicide rates from young people 15 to 24 increased significantly between 1970 and 1980. And approximately, like, the suicide rate for 15 and 19-year-olds increased by 27% between 1980 and 1982, which is like, when I was in school. This is according to the CDC. But yes, it was more prominent among males, about 5 to 1. And it was actually very more prominent among young Black men during the 80s and early 90s. Not surprised by that, considering the struggles. Firearms played a major factor in people that are under 25. One of the problems, granted, one of the problems we had is because the way we talked about mental health, it was shameful. It shouldn't be discussed. There was something wrong with you. We would make fun of people who were weird. I feel like the only time we didn't, if someone has like bipolar mania or schizophrenia, I remember the movie Sybil, which was, focused on multiple personality disorder, which I think now has been renamed to like dissociative disorder. And it was a fascinating movie and a fascinating discussion, because it was like, wow, this is crazy. But we also saw that the reason people develop multiple personalities is to disassociate from trauma that has happened to them. So we really didn't talk about mental health in the way we should have. And President Reagan at the time, I know some people love him. I'm not a fan. He was one of the worst presidents we've ever had. Reaganomics, not a good thing. The way he dealt with the AIDS crisis, freaking terrible. And also he deregulated the airline industry, which is affecting us today. Also, the way he treated people with mental health led to more homelessness. I mean, if you remember in the 80s, like I remember going to DC, there was a humongous homeless encampment across the street from the White House. You saw people everywhere, and most of them had mental health challenges. They couldn't get medicine because he believed the state should handle it. Well, not every state has the money to do that. That's why we have the federal government to help. And I firmly believe that we should help people who are struggling, whether it's because of where they were born, whether it's mental health, whatever their situation. I think we should try to help them so that they can break free from the cycle of, poverty, or if they need to be on medication for schizophrenia, for bipolar mania, for whatever the situation is, depression, we owe it to our society to help these people so that they can have a normal life and they can be a contributing member of society. Reagan didn't believe that. And so the consequences of his actions, the cruelty of his actions, definitely affected people. And I'm sure, if you are a Gen Xer, which I hope that's who's listening to this, you may or may not remember this being a situation. I do remember this being talked about. So, yeah, I feel like in school we focus most of our conversations on like, don't do drugs. Drugs are bad. Stranger danger, like the AIDS crisis, which was freaking terrifying. I mean, we were basically told, don't do this, don't do that. You're going to die. You're going to die. And if you do, get swallowed up by quicksand, get HIV or AIDS, do drugs, something happens to you, it's all your fault, which is really, really, really helpful. That's the best way to solve this. You get pregnant, it's your fault. Most of the responsibility always is on the woman. But like, how does that help solve a problem? Because all it tells kids is if you do something you shouldn't and you get in trouble, you don't tell anybody, because you're not going to get the help. You're just going to be ridiculed and persecuted. Not healthy. So I think that has led to Gen X being like, we don't talk about things. We don't ask for help. We're the I got it generation. And it probably is also what led to higher suicide rates, because we didn't feel like we had control over our, situation. You're told to like, suck it up, buttercup. You're a kid. This is my house. You do what I say. And rules and structure are very helpful. Don't get me wrong. But if you see someone struggling, getting mad at them for their struggles isn't going to help, because a lot of times you don't have control over that. It's a chemical thing, or sometimes it is a situation that is causing mental health problems. So yeah, I am a little passionate about this. I'm passionate about a lot of things, but the reason I'm passionate about this is because I struggled for a majority of my life with depression, sometimes very severe, depression, anxiety. At one point, my anxiety got so bad that I was having panic attacks, which scared me because I never had that before. Usually my anxiety was like situational because I'm an introvert and kind of shy. In some situations, just give me the ick. Now my anxiety is like travel anxiety, driving anxiety, um, which I know is perimenopause. Yes, I blame that for a lot of things, but it is a symptom of where you're just you have irrational fears of things because you can't control them. So, uh, yeah, and anxiety is a little it's an uncomfortable feeling. Um, but yeah, we like going to therapy was not really a thing or talked about. Now, I will say when I was in fourth grade, I did end up with therapy because I had a teacher who was a complete effing bitch. I'm going to curse in this, so just prepare yourself. She didn't like me. She didn't like my best friend at the time. My best friend at the time, father was a lawyer and my dad's an orthodontist. I think she kind of had a problem with what our parents did, but she would say things like, you're not that smart." She would change answers on my papers. She would write B, best you'll ever do. She told my parents at a parent teacher conference that she didn't understand why the rest of my teachers, K through third grade, had said I was so smart because she didn't think that I was smart. She did a real number on me and really kind of effed with my head and destroyed my confidence. Because up until then, I had full confidence in my abilities. I knew that I was smart. I'm not saying this to be arrogant. I knew that I was smart and capable. And, math wasn't my subject, but I worked really hard at it. I was a good student. I got all A's. And then this bitch came along and just decided she didn't like me. My mother later told me she should have taken me out of that class the minute she discovered that. She did make sure my brother and sister didn't have this teacher. This is one of the issues, I think, being the oldest child. If you are the oldest child in any situation, you are the experimental child, and your siblings benefit from your struggles, but you don't benefit from you have to go through it. And for me, I think a lot of the things that I had to endure, and being a people pleaser and a perfectionist and feeling like I had all this pressure on me from both my parents, kind of from society as being the oldest, and the pressure I put on myself was not a great combination for my mental health. Also, pretty sensitive person as an introvert and as a shy person. And that combination just kept building and building. And while I think I probably struggled with mental health, I'm going to skip junior high. Junior high is terrible for everyone. If anyone liked junior high, you were the lucky ones. But I know that most of the time when we talk to Gen X, even someone you don't know, and you say the words junior high, all of us are like, ugh, like this feeling. You kind of like want to go inside yourself because it was horrible. It's a horrible, horrible time in adolescence because you're not really a kid, but you're not an adult. Like it's a lot. So anyway, another thing that I grew up in a very small town. I don't think that was a good place for me either. Because I don't want to say I was a weird kid because I wasn't. I just saw things differently. I'm creative. That's why I'm a writer and in advertising. I see things differently. I like weird indie movies. I kind of like not everything on the fringe, but I'm like really into different things. And that wasn't celebrated or acknowledged where I grew up. Not saying by my parents, but like people in school would just kind of make fun of me. I was also very quiet, very serious. And I wasn't not popular, but I wasn't popular. Mostly I couldn't stand the popular girls in my class. They were freaking awful, snobby little bitches, and I didn't want to be around them. So by our senior year, nobody wanted to be around them. It's pretty funny. But I think my struggles started in high school. And I do remember I went to therapy, like I said, in fourth grade to help me. And I think a few times in high school. But my parents didn't really understand what was going on with me. They would say things like, "Oh, that's just you," or "Suck it up, buttercup," Um, and even like I felt like my siblings would be like, "Well, that's just how she is." Well, yeah, sometimes that's just how someone is, but that doesn't mean they should be ridiculed for it. And maybe they're that way because they're struggling. Um, and I'm in my head a lot. I always was in my head a lot. Hello, I'm a writer. Even though when I was younger, I wanted to be a marine biologist and work with beluga whales. But then when I couldn't dive anymore, I was like, well, you're really creative and a writer. Like, you should go into advertising. Thanks, Dad. Probably shouldn't have gone into advertising. I probably should have gone into psychology because I'm fascinated by people. But I also don't like people. Anyway, getting off track. But I think my struggle started in high school, but because I was in a, like I had a routine and I had to do this and I had to do that, I didn't notice this was happening. I just kind of like thought this is how the way I feel. When I went to college, that's when things really ramped up. Um, I think I was still struggling to like find my place as most college kids do. I remember this one time, and I don't know why I think of this. I started at University of Florida in the summer, and I remember I was hanging out with someone, and there was this guy. We called him Bagel Boy. And we were supposed to go somewhere, and he basically yelled at me. He's like, "Not you, you're ugly." And I was just like, "Excuse me." Now, if somebody said that to me, I'd be like, "Go f yourself. You're a piece of crap, and I don't really care what you think." And never talk to that person again, and probably not talk to my friends who did not defend me or tell him to go f off. But that kind of stuff kind of kept building up, right? When you're like made fun of, when people think you're weird because you see things differently, when they don't understand that you see things differently, when your creativity isn't celebrated, um, you just feel kind of like an outsider and you kind of go into yourself. Um, and that's sort of what I did. And I didn't even really I think I started thinking I my sophomore year was really when I was like, there's something wrong with me. I remember one night being in my apartment and just crying and crying, which I did a lot of nights, and I would stay up all night because I couldn't sleep. And I wrote a letter to my parents that I never sent. And to this day, I regret not sending it because I was like, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I'm drowning and I can't do this. I can't get out of bed. I'm so like, I can't sleep. I'm struggling so bad. I need help. And I never sent that letter because I was embarrassed and ashamed because that's kind of how you were made to feel. If you were struggling with depression, that was like a character flaw. If you had anxiety, it was your fault. It wasn't like the way you were made or the way things you didn't, how you dealt with things because maybe you didn't have the skills to deal with them. It wasn't like, let's help this person. It was like that person, So I am still not great at asking for help. From like my friends or family. I've gotten a little better, but I'm still the I got it girl. Speaking of which, we will be talking about that in my next podcast. We're going to interview someone who is going to talk about how we became the I got it generation and how that has affected us. So, but yeah, I remember that, and I'm going to be 51 in like a few months, and I still regret not sending the letter, and I'm still kind of embarrassed and ashamed about my struggles with depression, even though I have nothing to be ashamed with. And I do have regrets only because it took up so much of my 20s and 30s. And uh, I wish that it hadn't. I feel like it messed with my career. It messed with my social life, my love life. It messed with a lot of things. It mostly messed with me. And I, again, too, was just like, go to therapy, get on medication. There are so many other things you could do. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with medication because there's not. For some people, it really helps them. For me, it does not. SSRIs, the side effects for me are so bad. It's worse than the cure. Like I never felt good. Anxious, sweaty, just awful. Felt off all the time, which is not helpful. I remember um, I had a really great therapist when I lived in Chicago. She was amazing. And she sent me to a psychiatrist because psychologists can't prescribe medication. When I told him about the symptoms of having one of them gaining a bunch of weight, he's like, that doesn't happen. That's not true. I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm telling you I'm having issues and you're dismissing me. Not freaking helpful. Which is a lot of the reason why I didn't talk about my mental health. And occasionally when I would talk about it, it was like very shameful. I remember the only time that there wasn't shame around a mental health crisis was there was a guy I went to school with. I knew him from probably preschool through high school. Didn't really talk to him, much in college because we were in different places. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder in like our 20s. None of us were like late teens, early 20s. None of us were surprised because he was kind of always a weird kid. Like he would eat pencil lead when I was in elementary school. He was just an amazingly talented artist. I still think I have a t-shirt that has some of his art on it from high school. He tried to commit suicide several times and he would get on the medication, but then he would feel terrible because he couldn't create. And it was very hard for him to find medication. And unfortunately, he did end up committing suicide when we were in college. He hung himself in his parents' garage, and unfortunately his parents found him, and they thought like, oh, we had this conversation, we're going to help him, because they tried. They really, really, really tried, because it was trying to find medication that he could function on, could also be the amazingly talented artist he was. It was really just so sad. And I remember all of us that knew him, none of us judged him. None of us were surprised because we knew he had bipolar, but we just felt such immense loss and sadness. And there was a guy that like was his really good friend that I knew, and we both went to the same school. And it was like the most time we started talking to each other. And every time we saw each other, he would give me a hug, because we knew Stephen for so long. And so we had this connection, and we both like felt just the loss was terrible. And I think that was the first time that any of us were like, wow, mental health is not a joke. It's not something to be dismissed. And sometimes people are struggling so bad they don't see a way out. And I remember later, one of my jobs at a advertising agency, well, all my jobs at advertising agency, was to work on a medication that had a new indication. It was a mental health medication that had a new indication for bipolar. And I was like, oh, I know about this. And I came up with the winning campaign. My art director and I, it was since been stolen. Other people took credit for it. We found out actually when we were at the agency that it was picked, and we weren't getting any credit. I went to my creative director. He's like, that's just what happens. No. Again, things like that, when you feel out of control and you're like, what the hell? But I really came up with a campaign of finding your steady state of mind. And I was into yoga. So it was like a yoga pose, a balancing thing. Was inspired by my friend. And if someone had asked about the campaign, because I read when people were talking about it, I'm like, that's not how it was developed. So yeah, some people in advertising suck. But it was things like that too, like in my 20s and 30s, where I felt out of control and I didn't know how to handle things, and I just wanted to do a good job. But I also had this confidence in my ability, and I knew that I should be doing more. And I just didn't, I guess, know how to express myself, or to kind of just disregard the assholes and the hacks. I didn't do a great job sometimes at picking where I was working, because the economy and things and advertising, I felt desperate. And what I really should have done was been like, okay, is this the best place for me, for my mental health and my creativity? A lot of times, no. My first job that I loved it. I worked myself to the bone. I had the best time, but I gave myself an ulcer, and I just exhausted myself. I was working, never really having much of a social life, and you got to have other things in your life. And so I felt like I was drowning for most of my 20s. It got really, really bad in my 30s. I think partially that was hormonal. I didn't even know about it then, but I think because I had endometriosis and I was having some issues, I think that was when it was starting. Because perimenopause can start when you're 35. I think I was starting to have, my hormones were affecting, and maybe they did all my life, affecting my mental health. And my mother said to me after she got sick, she apologized to me. Yeah, I'm going to try not to cry because it makes me want to cry. That she's like, I'm sorry I didn't help you. You needed help, and we failed you. And I appreciated that so much, because I was. And I tried to help myself. I sort of tried to ask for help. I was told to suck it up, and that's just how you are. And I just kept drowning and drowning and drowning. And yeah, I needed help. I also needed to grow up in an era where mental health is not shameful. Being depressed is not shameful. Having anxiety is not shameful. Should it be your whole identity? No, but if you do have those challenges, people do need to know and need to be accommodating and understanding. And if they're not going to that, because I had some friends who are like, I don't care, like you said that. I'm like, I'm depressed. I'm not going to always act my best. And I'm sorry. And if you can't understand that, at this point, I'd be like, if you can understand that, granted, I don't suffer from depression anymore. And if I start to feel that way, I'm like, oh, my medicine for my perimenopause isn't working, because it's a different feeling. I'm not going to have you in my life. I just can't. I don't have the patience or the time, and I don't need my mental health affected by people who suck ass. There's a lot of cursing. My mother would be so disappointed. But it meant a lot to me that my mom acknowledged it. because, um, yeah, I probably needed a severe intervention in my 20s. I probably what I should have done when I sent that letter in college and taken a break and got help and figured it out. But the thing is too is what people don't talk about mental health is that it's not just going to therapy and getting on medication. That's not going to solve things. You have to get to the root cause, obviously. Sometimes it is chemical, sometimes it's situational, sometimes it's a combination of both. For me, it was, yes, the pressure I put on myself, the pressure I was put on by other people, my people pleasing, my perfectionist tendencies, like all of those combined, not a good combination. So, yeah. I will say that things that I have learned is that you got to do things that you love. You got to working out helps. It doesn't have to be like major. Find something you love to do. The endorphins release will make you feel better. uh, I love going on walks. I love being in nature. Um, I'm not going to do things I don't want to do anymore. I'm going to be around people that support me and that I want to be around. I am going to live my life the best that I can. And part of that is because I lost my parents. And from 2015, as I've talked about before, 2020 was really hard. I don't know what it was, but I didn't have depression. Like I was grieving for 5 years. And, you know, in some parts of me, I'm still grieving, but not in the same way. But I didn't break. Because I had to step up and I just wanted to be there for them. And it was hard. It was hard. And I think partially I didn't focus on myself. I was so focused on them. And then once my parents were both gone, I looked at myself in the mirror. I was like, oh my God, I need to get my shit together. I don't look good. I don't feel good. Like I got to start taking care of myself. And I need to start doing things that I love. Started my business. You know, I want to travel. I went to Portugal last year. So I moved to Atlanta because I wanted to be closer to my sister and to watch my niece and nephew grow up. My brother's not too far away in Florida. So, yeah, I mean, I made significant changes in my life and I still work at it every day. And like I said, when I started having really bad perimenopause symptoms, and a lot of them were depression, anxiety, I was like, this feels weird because it wasn't like constantly, it would just be triggered certain times. And I'm like, there's nothing going on to me. Like I could feel, I knew the feeling. I'm like, I don't like this feeling. I don't need this feeling. This is not me. Uh, and it got bad. Like there were times where I was like, just feeling, I'd be crying, I'd be angry. I would just feel like my negative self-talk. I'm like, why? This is not, no, this is not normal. And so I got help. So my bottom line is like, if you are Gen X, which you should be if you're listening to this, but even if you're not, there is no shame in getting help for your mental health. There is no shame in being depressed or having anxiety or, you know, having bipolar mania, schizophrenia, dissociative disorder, whatever it is, there is no shame. There's no shame in getting help. There's no shame in talking about it. There is no shame in saying, I'm struggling. And you are not a bad person. You did nothing wrong to deserve this. And if anyone judges you, tell them to go F off. And don't judge yourself, but make the decision that you're going to get out of it. There is light at the end of the tunnel. And it's day by day. And some days will be good and some days will be bad. But just take the steps that you need to do something, whether it's just telling yourself, today I got out of bed. Today I took a shower. Today I went for a walk. Today I did this. And celebrate those tiny wins, because the more you do that, the more you'll be like, oh, if I can do that, then I can do this, and I can do this, and talk to people. And again, keep people in your life who are going to support you. People who aren't are going to judge you. You don't need them. We are too old to be putting up with people who are assholes. We have enough of that. If you drive or you work, like stuff that you have that's not in our control, fine. But what's in your control, do the best you can. Having a doggy helps. I will say I had a dog. I've had 3 dogs now, and one of the best things ever, because it gets you outside. They're there for you, and it's something to love and talk to, who's never going to judge you. Although sometimes I think they do. Anyway, we are getting to that 30-minute mark, and I know this has been a heavy one. I try not to ramble too much, but I wanted to share my story. I don't know if I went as in depth as maybe I could have, but I will never say that I don't regret the years that I feel like I lost. And and that I don't think about how my life could be different or could have been different if I'd gotten help sooner or figured this out. But you know what? It is what it is. And I'm not unhappy where I am now. I really love my life. Is it everything I want it to be? No, but I'm pretty damn happy. I love where I live. I love my puppy. I love, my business. I love my office that I'm sitting in. I love my friends, my family. And I love being single because I have no time to put up with nonsense. Not saying I'm not open to love, but you better bring it because I'm not putting up with your shizness. So anyway, with that, I'm going to end this podcast by saying, take care of yourself. I'm happy to talk about this more. If you have questions in the show notes, you can email me or respond on, our Instagram, the GenX Experience pod. I will talk to you. I will listen to you if you want to ask me what I did and if I have any tips or suggestions. Happy to talk to anybody anytime about this. But just remember, your mental health doesn't define you. Whatever you've done in your life, past, present, or none of that defines you. All we can do is try to be good people and do the best we can. So let's get off of this depressing topic for now. And until next time, my Gen Xers, my fellow Gen Xers, don't you forget about me because I will not forget about you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the GenX Experience. If today's episode resonated with you, please consider sharing it on social media or with a friend. We'll see you back here next time.